Good afternoon. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to this special events, public events that we have about large seismoacoustic events, and we will have two invited talks to start and a panel discussion later on. So I will keep it very short because we have a lot of content to go through, and I want to first introduce this first invited talk, which will be talking about the earthquake sequence at the border between Turkey and Syria. And it is my pleasure to welcome Professor Tuncay Taymaz from the Istanbul Technical University to provide us with this cutting-edge research and results that have not been all published yet. So without further ado, Professor Taymaz, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. President Pietrik. Dear Director, dear Right Honorable gentlemen, ladies, and all the delegates, students, colleagues, my fellow friends, and of course, journalists to spread the word, welcome on board. And if you don't mind, I'd like to walk around a little bit to introduce and go fast what we've been doing so far. So my title is already announced as in the first slide. The question, I named it a giant jigsaw puzzle, motivated, just because here we are in a philosophical seismology. We don't know when and how to rupture or not to rupture. That's a nice Hamletic question that I inspired from Dr. Floyd's opening speech. So the bigger, the larger, the stronger altogether. So I've been collaborating, but I will be giving you a fast introduction and then going to the subject on the Eastern Mediterranean tectonics, because this is a fast, furious, international, competitive, collaborative race against time to publish a first Science Citation Index paper to flag your national flag in the oceans, on lands, and so on. So we owe a lot to the NASA or European Space Agency and the others to remotely, of course, detect all the earthquake-prone areas in the oceans, also on the continents. But when we say a jigsaw puzzle, this is the Arabian intrusion to the north with a rate of 25 millimeters per year from global positioning system data sets that we owe a lot to the first MIT, Caltech, Harvard, Athens, Kandilli Observatory, Turkey, to study last 30 or 40 years together to make a much more stronger groups of data sets. So the question in the East Anatolian fault zone is slow, it's mended, it's been cascaded in different geometry, and faster in the Aegean domain, in the Hellenic Trench, and so on, to direct the motion. So this is our work domain. Since I am invited with first time to the CTBTO, I'd like to give you a credit because we have to monitor the data, the observation, measurement. This is positive science. So the more data we have from global network, or regional network, or local network, or after an earthquake, or tsunamis at temporary arrays, to get much better data set to increase our resolution to image. It's like upscales or downscales in your retina scale mobile phones or your TV sets at home to look for the details of the anomalies you are after. I'm not going to go through all those, but we've done this last 15 years with my PhD students and with my collaborative friends in ETH Zurich, because we need a supercomputer that we use in ETH Zurich, and to map all these subduction or collision zones that from the northern Europe and throughout whole planet Earth, that in 3D. Here's an image, whether you are after Central Anatolian volcanics in Cappadocia region or other volcanic fields in the Eastern Anatolia, but they are all prone to produce a large earthquakes. When I say large magnitude, on a Richter scale, 7.4 or 5 or above. So it's a beginning. So we are being scissored by two major faults, North Anatolian fault and East Anatolian fault zone, and it's have a different evolution in time. And here I am showing some depth sections from 3D velocity models that we published. In North Anatolian fault is, of course, targeting, let's say, mega cities like Istanbul for the next big earthquake to rupture or not rupture, and where and how, and so on. But Eastern Anatolian fault zone itself is much deeper on a lithospheric scale that we see from the S or P wave anomalies in T, but we'll come back to that one. So it's like a dripping or melting continents from all the way through across Moho and down to the lithospheric scale that we are able to measure down to 300 kilometers in 3D in every degrees. But what I have done with international collaboration, we divided the whole Earth on 10 different regions and to collate as much as data possible in 3D and three-component broadband stations so that we can use full waveform inversion rather than travel time inversion to look for the wave packages to have a better velocity model. Not in 1D, not in 2D, it's 3D. So we have to forget about Jeffrey's, Bullen, Herring, ISP, or Prem model of Woodhouse and so on, or Brian Kenneth models and so on, that we are all using in CTBT. So this was the first event. We gathered about 10 years of data of tens of thousands of stations. Stations are in red, in green here. Earthquakes are in stars, in black, in red, and then we have a reference station. So this is the coverage of ray path that we published. We called CSM in Geophysical Research Letter in 2013, collaborative seismic Earth model. So stronger when we are together, much better, much easier. And in this case, we use almost all available supercomputers in Europe. One is the PISDINT in ETH in Swiss National Laboratory in Zurich, one in Utrecht, in Oxford, Cambridge, JPL in NASA, Australia, New Zealand, China, you name it. We have used all of them. So this is the outcome. Okay, then all of a sudden, while we are waiting a big earthquake threatening to Istanbul, all of a sudden we have a forgotten East Anatolian fault zone. And this new earthquake colored in yellow, but this picture comes from a paper I published in 2021 in Tectonophysics. I am also on the Elsevier's editorial board member on this journal, but on this fault, I have, in fact, studied 30 plus years ago during my PhD when I was in Cambridge and Oxford. And this was the picture then. And all available earthquake source mechanisms that I studied, and we knew where to expect the next big, large earthquake, and which fault branches. But again, the yellow one is the 6th of February 2023. It's Nurdağ Pazarcık, although internationally it's called Kahramanmaraş, but this was not the epicenter. There's no fault actively going through Kahramanmaraş or tiring or scissoring, but that's something else we can discuss later on. So this was historical earthquakes we got throughout thousands of years. Thanks to Professor Nick Ambresses of Imperial College, he spent his 80 years of lifetime locating all these historical earthquakes, and we are now knowing how to go. So, but along the Eastern Anatolian fault zone, there are seismic gaps like that white box, Doğan Yol, that we published in 2020, just 2 years before the earthquake. That was the branch we were expecting, and also in the Karlova, marked with K, towards the Bingöl. And also to the Gulf of Iskenderun area, there are smaller patches that not ruptured at least last 100 years. But we have a turnaround of every 100, 500, or thousands of years of earthquake cycle. This is remember, the first picture, this is a plate boundary, major plate boundary fault. And the Arabian plate struck this 6.7, it's a smaller one. It's left some still gaps, like in Malatya fault to the left, and Elazığ, and to the Palu segments. So to make it short, coming back to today's subject, Kahramanmaraş earthquake, it came all of a sudden in seconds after the February 6, 7.8, although we calculated 7.9. About 9 hours later, it merged to the Sürgü-Çardak fault, and then 2 weeks later, on the 20th of February in Hatay, Antakya, 6.4. That's a different mechanism, but in the same branch. So everything colored with thick blue is the one ruptured on this series within 9 hours. So this is a remarkable earthquake for Turks or international seismologists. Then I was woken up 4 o'clock in the morning by an Australian journalist hey, wake up, there's an earthquake, but nobody from Turkey. So, and I look at it, oh, I said, this is giant, if it's true. And I spent whole day afternoon trying to get the decent data set from Turkish Command of General Mapping, Türkiye, and this for GPS positions, strong motion data sets, and so on. Within 24 hours, with my friends from US scientists and Athens Observatory and ITU and Yıldız Technical University, we were able to calculate the kinematic vectors for the first event. Then it was huge. I said, okay, this has to be below above 7.5. And then we studied, and we published this within 36 hours in European Euro-Mediterranean Seismological Commission website to announce the world, hey, come on, this is a big earthquake. And this was a race and the first publication. Then with our colleagues, I collected with my students the first 10 days of aftershocks, locate the precise seismicity or epicenters in 2D or 3D, and then we managed to make the first publication in this earthquake with Oregon University computers that we have used. Again, we can discuss. So this was a picture, cascading rupture. There are some section with supershear rupture, some section with subshear rupture is initiated, and we have the corresponding velocities and the offsets, of course, up to 10 meters or some places up to 12 meter offset. So this is a small animation if it works. If there is any journalists around us, I don't know. Within 10 seconds, with 3.2 kilometers per second, Pazarcık-Nurdağ segment was broken, and then it's been bilaterally ruptured in either ends. And if we were able to run properly earthquake early network stations, within 10 seconds, we would forecast and warn the people, and the remaining 80 seconds or 60 seconds time, we could save tens of thousands of lives. But anyhow, so this was the first event. And this is the snapshot, as you see, from 10 seconds to 20 seconds for the major earthquake. There's a gap we could pick up with the right network data sets. This early warning system is vital, and it should have been monitored properly. So anyway, so then the time is running, and so far I'm already collaborating with US scientists, and of course USGS never left me alone, and with them we published this second paper on the Seismological Society of America's paper, a journal called Seismic Record. With the, if you log into their pages, you will see our collaborative notes. Again, if I may come over here, we were able to do first round of earthquake mechanism within 3.5 hours with the teleseismic networks and local networks, but we were waiting to get satellite data for the seismogeodetic data from near-Earth orbit satellites so that we can have deformation independently. So then it took 1 day. First image came to the California in the JPL lab in NASA's labs. We confirmed, and then all those images came, third and fourth date, and so on. We had all these warning from the Sentinel, all that other available data sets, and made a joint inversion of all the available. Now we are talking about tens of petabytes size data, big data. And we are using, of course, artificial modeling, and I'm not going to say further, but if you know how to handle the big data, it's not to scare yourself. It's easy to handle with the right tools and so on. And within 10 days or 11 days, we were able to write down the paper, and within the 2 weeks' time after the earthquake, and we submitted the second paper. And these are some images that we know from the Hatay airport, for instance, Antakya, that was on the question, and some of the these red bars on the lines are the ruptured segments detected from the space geodesy only, no field geology here. Then you combine the seismology and geodesy, seismogeodetic data, so you can give the reliable answers. And so this was, and then these are the data sets. You can find all the details in the USGS web page, also in this paper. And here we calculated 7.9 for the first event. This is the second event. Again, GPS stations from Turkish Command of Mapping, 7.74. And this is the joint mechanism. Again, we have a cascading, well, here every branch. We modeled 99% of all the data set with 3 segments of each, an East Anatolia fault, major band, and Çardak fault. And this is the combination. It proves or confirms the data set. But not only US scientists, but also Chinese Earthquake Administration and Chinese Academy of Science was very active. So I was also collaborating with them with their utilities, their methods, their supercomputers, and there too we've been able to model the first event after the earthquake within a couple of hours, and the second one, and found the similar mechanisms. And this was published in Earthquake Science. It's another Elsevier journal. And yet, within 3 weeks, we learned a lot of damage, site amplifications, some geological problems on the acceleration data sets. And that was just because here, for instance, we have triangles in black, over 100 of them, broadbands, and the open circles are those observed with these pulse-like signals, and there we observed major damages, so because soil amplification and so on. This was the second paper, and now with the US and Chinese groups, within 2 weeks' time, we were able to model with independent data sets and approaches and similar results and the publications. And of course, Japanese friends, colleagues were interested, and we've done this kinematic source modeling based on our first paper's geometry, and we did modeling and also the Coulomb and stress transfer to look whereabout of the second big earthquake. Again, here too, we've calculated magnitude 7.9 to 7.6 for the second one. This was the evolution in time of the segments. It's a bit complicated, but if there is a question, I can explain later on. Then this is a small animation, if it works, how the splay fault is the initial fault that triggered the supershear rupture in either end, and the localized seismotectonic model, and the up one is the second event, which is 9 hours later. So it's the similar depth, similar mechanism, but different orientation, gave this complex evolution of the network of faulting, cascading, one after each other, and this is going to be another. But, so all these preliminary but fast publication has been done. All their published work, and now what you are gonna see is those papers are pending, accepted papers for science, nature geoscience, nature communication, cyber research, georesearch, and another 10 of them still pending, waiting in the assembly line to be page-proofed for the next one. So this is the first event that this covers a huge amount of paper. It's a holistic work. We've done everything you can think of in seismology, and this is accepted for science with Chinese group. They are very clever groups as well. But this first picture, second picture, and third one I can discuss for a long time. But the upper right, the branch we called segment A is Amanos, segment P is Pazarcık, segment E, Ergenek, and so on. Those are the areas that you see in TV screens, large destructions, and I'll go back, and demolition in livestock. There are a series of earthquakes every half second, 10 seconds, 12 seconds, and so on, ruptured. And in some locations, we looked, analyzed the Mach cone zoning, and we found super shear rupture that's shaded in gray. And that's based on S waves arrival times in 2D and 3D, but also we use all available P waves. So I'm skipping this one. And another study, we joined only seismogenic data sets. I mean, the geodetic data set mainly called INSA and other ones. And this was also accepted for nature geoscience. We have similar in 3D perspective branching of the cascading fault lines, and proves the observation of different methods. And yet, 2 weeks later, while I was busy with these papers, all of a sudden we had this February 2023 in Antakya, Hatay region, that there's a little bit of tilt. There's a normal faulting component that hit the Iskenderun Bay and ground, so causally up to about 10, 15 in some location, 20 centimeters of tsunami-genic waves triggered by earthquake. But this was a different mechanism. It's nothing to do. But in the history, we had plenty of other earthquakes too. So this, again, from our old papers that we published in 2012, in the region in the eastern Mediterranean, in the Levantine basin, along the way, Palmyras in Syria, Lebanon is up to Israel, down to the Aqaba Bay, along the Dead Sea Fault Zone. There are some locations there has been a large earthquakes, produced tsunamis, and we see tsunami deposits in Cyprus and southern shores of Anatolia as well. So for the question mark, for the 13th of August, 1822, was the nearest location, 7.5, and today's subject earthquake also occurred almost exactly the same location. But this was 7.5, our third earthquake, 6.7, is very rather small. We don't expect any tsunamis for 6.5 or 7. You have to be a bit larger. And the mechanism is also shearing the wavefront and so on. But in the all the way through Hellenic Range to the Cyprus, there are plenty of those. This was also from a published work. But what is the reason behind? So we are not flying on balloons on the Cappadocia, and we are not on a touristic visit, so we are trying to look at what's underneath it. So we have tools in seismology, P waves, receiver function, or S rays. We've done all these last 20 years with collaborative works. This was from GFZ group that when I was Alexander von Humboldt fellow over there, collaborated with colleagues and looking at the some results that we published already. And these, if you know how to read, graphs and seismic anomalies, and you'll see where to expect the next big ones. And recently, another PhD student of mine from Berlin Technical University, Judith Maria Konfal, completed her thesis with me at Istanbul Technical University. We published another tomographic method, and that we know the reasons where and how we have slapped here or a break off and whereabout to expect large earthquakes, which geometry and so on. So with the bending locations or geometry of especially this Kahramanmaraş earthquake, where we have a banding or cascading, some what we call partitioning of the seismic, okay, in this case, let's say displacement values, that reduces the sizes of the magnitude, and because it gets rid of the, some of the seismic momentum elsewhere. And otherwise, we would have much larger earthquakes triggered for the next smaller faults and cause major destruction and so on. I tried to be fast so that maybe I assume to get some questions. I have received smaller grants from various institutions for this research, but CTBTO was the last one to invite me here, so that I put that one as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Taymaz. That was a very interesting talk into this very dramatic earthquake sequence, and it's extremely impressive, the amount of work we've done with this group of scientists all over the world and seismologists all over the world, and all these papers that are getting ready. So I'm sure there's a lot of questions, so I would like to at least have offer to have a couple of questions in the room, if I can see you, and if you want to ask a question, I would like to ask you to go to the microphone because I don't see you so well. Is there any questions?
It was not easy to get, it was not easy, do you hear me? It was not easy to arrange my timetable, so I slept only 2 hours a night, trying to match Japanese, Chinese, and US scientists' time log. I was almost going to die thanks to my wife. She organized all the media requests from international press, including BBC, Sky News, whatever, from Canada, Australia, Middle East, Turkey. And I think I spend more time with media than in front of steam computer in studios and so on, but they are the ones spreading the word. And I'm thankful to all these institutions. They allow me to use their supercomputers. Otherwise, it would have been impossible within 2 weeks to produce 15 papers in the respective journals. Thank you very much for inviting. I guess there is no question.
So if you have questions for after, no, there is a question. I see someone moving. Please.
So I couldn't quite catch, for the February 20th event, was that Was that expected from stress transfer?
Yes, yes.
That was,
we knew it. We knew it already. We knew more or less the location. We knew all the geometry, not the timing. That the Japanese and the other, okay, I'm not.
But it was promoted by the previous.
Yeah, of course. Including my own works, my students, my international ones, we knew it, and it worked. But now what we are doing, I didn't mention. These are mostly the 2D, but we are now doing 3D dynamic modeling of these models, whether it's Pru's, these Supershear and Mach-Con. That's about to be accepted in a decent journal that I didn't show any result from that one too. That's also a Chinese group. I must admit, Chinese scientists invested more time, interest to this earthquake than any other nation in the world. I am, although using USGS NIST and all these JPL labs, European resources, but Chinese were much faster, properly. We received for the science paper 2 referees that we know, one from Stanford, one from the Harvard, well-known professors. They all said, this is a holistic paper. It should be published immediately. That was the first sentence. You know the meaning of holistic. Yeah? So it's incredible. So, thank you very much. But I changed my talk because Dr. Floyd said stronger, together is stronger, better, and big data set. So this proves that my collaborative, competitive, fast and furious job against time and the large groups. Oh, by the way, I am also invited another 8 or 10 papers submitted to Science and Nature. I am one of those referees. So there are groups that I know who are in which lab doing what and how level. So this is the joy of science that in the previous panel, the lady, Right Honorable lady was saying to just enjoy it. That's what I am doing. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Avantia.